So Islamic social finance deals with the mechanism which are available in the Islamic finance system to assist the poor people, to assist the underprivileged people, and to ensure equitable distribution of wealth among the people who live in society. So before going to make a discussion on the mechanisms which are available in Islamic finance for the purpose of societal benefits, let me share the concept of fiscal policy with you, that from your economics course, you probably have come to learn that there are two macroeconomic policies, including monetary policy and the fiscal policy. So fiscal policy deals with what? Fiscal policy deals with generation of government revenue or mobilization of government revenue, and how the expenditure for public will be made. So these two things are the broad areas which are the issues to be concerned in the fiscal policy. And these are also the issues in public finance. I do not know whether you have already taken this course or you will be taking it later. So in this lecture, we'll try to understand that how Islamic finance deals with, or Sharia deals with the public finance, or what is the guidance from the Sharia regarding the public finance. So when government decides to enact or formulate fiscal policy, usually you will see that there is a debate from different part of societies or different kind of civil societies. So these societies which make discussion on the fiscal policy in general, they can be grouped into two groups. So one group is mostly known as socialist parties, or the Communist Party, who are much concerned about the government involvement for the development of people and for helping people to manage their livelihood. And there is another group which are known as kind of conservative parties, and they want government to involve in these activities. I mean, activities for economy activities. The involvement should be curtailed. So government should not be very much concerned about the expenditure for people, expenditure for society. So the thing is that this debate is a long debate, and there is no answer that who should be given priority in making the decision for fiscal policy. However, whatever the decision taken in the fiscal policy regarding the public revenue and public expenditure, it has implications for the people who live in the society. And the people who represent the socialist group or who represent the conservative groups, there are people in these groups who are followers of some religions. However, they do not want to invite religious guidance in their discussion on the fiscal policy. They want to avoid the religious involvement or religious teaching on the fiscal policy. So, and they also do not want to encourage people who knows the religion much to participate and to give opinion regarding formulation of fiscal policy. So that's why we do not see the reflection of religious teaching on the traditional fiscal policy, even though a good number of Muslim countries have acknowledged that their constitution is guided by Islam, or their constitution is guided by Quran. However, their policy formulation is most often does not reflect the teaching of religion Islam. So what is the solution? How can we give input in the fiscal policy formulation? I mean, how can we give input from the Islam? So, and a strategy has been taken by some people that they will be part of these two groups, any of these two groups, either socialist parties or conservative parties, and they know the Islam very well, and they will try to influence their party to take input from the Islam when they will be formulating the fiscal policy. So to some extent, it has become successful. That's why you see that government tries to think of the religious teaching and try to relate something, and not fully try to relate something what has been suggested in Islam. However, it is not a very welcoming initiative from the part of the societies who are advocate of socialist parties or the conservative parties, because they believe that as there are a number of sections in the people in the group of people who follow the Islam. So if we follow if we take the advice of these people, it might create a social divide. So that is a big challenge, that there are a number of sections in the Muslim community, and their opinions differ significantly. So when government or the political parties try to represent or tries to take input from one section, it might create disturbance because other sections might not become agree on that. So that's why it's a challenging part. Now the thing is that what should you do? What is our responsibility in that case? You have probably come to learn that in the world, 1% richest people has the 43% total personal wealth in the world. And the bottom 1%, bottom, I mean in the poor 1%, poor 1% holds 1% of total personal wealth in the world. So this kind of inequitable distribution of wealth is very prevalent, not in the developed countries. It is very much prevalent in emerging economies, developing economies like our economy. So fiscal policy tries to, or fiscal policy aims to ensure the equitable distribution of wealth among the people of society to ensure the social justice. So what do we mean by equitable distribution of wealth? There's a difference between the equal distribution of wealth and the equitable distribution of wealth. One is equal distribution and another one is equitable. Can you share your idea? What do you think regarding the difference between these two terms? Which is our objective, equal distribution of wealth or equitable distribution of wealth? You are there?
Yes, equitable distribution.
Okay, I can't hear. When it is equitable distribution, it indicates that after meeting the demand of your need, you have to be concerned to distribute wealth for the purpose of social benefit, for the purpose of greater benefit of the society. It is not that I will try to accumulate as much as possible wealth and I will not be concerned with what is happening in other parts of the society. So equitable distribution is indicating that kind of distribution, but in case of equal distribution, it is the thing that each person, regardless of the wealth level or regardless of the income level, will have equal amount of wealth, and it is technically impossible. It's technically impossible because each person does not have the authority or the qualification to manage the same amount of property. So there are differences among the people who can earn more property, who can manage property. So equal distribution is not our objective. Our objective is equitable distribution of wealth. So in the Muslim society and from our Muslim countries, there are practice of 4 types of taxation. So one taxation is on the land, and another taxation is a kind which comes from the war, the defeated party. I mean, when one party is defeated in the war, the resources of the defeated party will be taken, and wealth tax. And there is another tax which is you probably have come to learn, that is jizya. So which contents we'll be covering in today's session? Basically, we'll try to learn about the Zakat, Waqf, and the Islamic Microfinance, and how government should prioritize its spending policy, and how tax can be compared with the Zakat. So first of all, you probably have come to learn about the Zakat, and this Zakat and the Waqf, these two things, Zakat and Waqf, are very popular mechanism to ensure the equitable distribution of wealth. So if these two things are being executed properly, it is expected that there will be equitable distribution of wealth. So we know that Zakat is a kind of the charity, and it's not a kind of voluntary payment. It is a kind of mandatory payment or mandatory donations, and it is one of the cornerstones of the Islam. And if anyone disobeys, or if anyone rejects, or if anyone does not execute this responsibility, he will not be in Islam. So we know that Zakat ensures the equitable distribution of wealth, but how? How it is calculated, and who are responsible for giving it? So there is a concept, there is a misconception among us that only the people who have gold or silver or this kind of valuable materials, they are only liable to pay Zakat. But this is not the rule. Rather, there is a concept that Nisab. So if people have Nisab amount of wealth for 1 year, for last 1 year, he or she has to make the payment of Zakat by calculating the exact amount. So what is the amount? The amount is 1/40th of your wealth on which Zakat will be applied, or in terms of percentage, it is 2.5%. So the question is how it is calculated. It's an obligatory payment. Now, how it is calculated or when it is calculated? It is calculated on the basis of lunar year, and the number of days in lunar year is approximately 15 or 16 days less than the number of days. Sorry, not 15 or 16 days. 5 to 6 days less than the number of days available in Gregorian calendar. So on the basis of lunar year, it is 2.5%. But if you consider the Gregorian year, the percentage applicable will become slightly higher. Slightly higher because the number of days is greater in Gregorian calendar. So usually for the convenience, people use the lunar year and consider this 2.5%, and it is mandated, and it has been continuing for last 1500 years, 2.5%. Now the question is, what is Nisab? Nisab is a specific amount of or threshold level of wealth, and if anyone holds this amount of wealth for previous 1 year, and this wealth does not include the amount of wealth which will be used for consumption or which will be used for necessary consumption expenditure, that amount of wealth will be excluded, and remaining wealth which does not also include the wealth for personal use except gold, and the wealth in which the person is occupying, those wealth will be excluded. So what is the amount of Nisab? Usually the Nisab amount is translated in terms of the value of quantity of gold or the quantity of silver, and it is around 11 point something ounce multiplied by 7.5 for the amount, if we take the perspective of gold. And conventionally now, what is the practice? The practice is multiply this, it is the quantity. It is the quantity of gold in total, the quantity of gold for the Nisab, and multiply it by the market value of the gold. Say, I'm writing here, it is 75,000 now. And say, for example, this amount is 600,000. So if anyone has this amount of wealth, which he or she is holding, has been holding for previous 1 year, or greater than this level of wealth, excluding those wealth what I just mentioned earlier, he or she will be responsible for paying Zakat. And now there is another misconception. So I have shared one misconception that if I have only gold or silver, I'll be responsible for paying Zakat, or otherwise not. And now, say for example, some people are claiming that I do not have any cash. Say, for example, here the Zakat is amounting, say Zakat requires 15,000 payment here for assuming it is 2.5% of 600,000. Now, some people claim that I do not have any cash, so I'm not required to pay Zakat. And this is another misconception. If you do not have cash, you have to convert it. You have to convert some portion of your asset to make cash. And there is no way to avoid the responsibility of Zakat by saying that I have no cash, so I am not responsible for paying it. So Zakat does not call for those person only who have the cash. Zakat is for those person who have Nisab amount of wealth. And Nisab is not equal to the gold, silver. Nisab includes all type of assets, excluding the assets which will be occupied or which will be used for which is used for personal consumption, excluding those assets. And usually the wealth which are income generating wealth, usually those assets are included in the wealth. But there is some strategies used by some strategies because strategy is not a appropriate word here, because people use this strategy to avoid Zakat, that they claim that this wealth, for example, this real estate, I'm holding it for building real estate for my own use when it is the time for paying Zakat. But when the time of Zakat is expired, I mean, not expired, Zakat can be paid, usually can be paid in any point of the lunar year, which is convenient for that person. For the Zakat payer, there is no specific date on which Zakat should be paid. Usually people pay Zakat during Ramadan for more, more reward from the creator. It's not for the Ramadan is the month for paying Zakat. It's not like that. So what I was saying, that people change their purpose. People change their purpose as a strategy to avoid Zakat. People believe that I will be using this land for my own dwelling house. That's why this is my personal and I'll be occupying it. I will be living on it. That's why it is not an asset on which Zakat should be paid. But later it turns out that this person is holding this asset for selling it at a higher market price, or for giving it, for leasing it out to the developer, these things. Okay, so we have got a very basic concept of Zakat, and we have got a how it is calculated, the preliminaries.
স্যার
Now,
একটা কোশ্চেন ছিল স্যার।
sure.
স্যার এগ্রিকালচার ল্যান্ডের ক্ষেত্রে কি স্যার জাকাত দিতে হয়?
Usually agricultural land, people consider it that if it is income generating, then it should be considered in the wealth on which Zakat should be applied. But if there is no income for long years, and I do not have any purpose to sell it immediately, in that case, it is not included in the calculation of Zakat. Okay.
জি স্যার, জি স্যার।
Okay. So there is a long debate that which assets should be included in the calculation of Zakat. And one caveat here regarding the calculation of Zakat is that Zakat cannot be applied, or Zakat is not calculated on the Sharia incompliant asset. And by this time, you already have come to learn what is Sharia compliant asset, which assets are not Sharia compliant. So if anyone accumulates wealth by means of Sharia incompliant sources, and that wealth will not be considered for calculation of Zakat. And one thing, so let me give you some idea that why there is a debate regarding the inclusion of asset for the purpose of calculating Zakat. Say, for example, I have investment in stock market for 1 million. And this is 1 million BDT. So this is my investment, and absolutely this is my wealth. And I find that it is it is in my Nisab wealth. Okay. So before going to this discussion, let me share another misconception that some people believe that Zakat should be calculated that, say, for example, I have this total asset, which I have calculated, estimated that it should be on this, I should pay Zakat, and people subtract the Nisab amount from here. However, this is not the rule. Nisab is a kind of threshold just to indicate that on when the Zakat will be applicable. It's not the kind of that you have to calculate Zakat on by applying the Zakat percentage on the excess amount of total asset over the Nisab amount. Okay. So what I was saying, that I have investment in stock market, say for example 1 million. Now, there is a good chance that I will be able to have a capital gain, or I will be having a capital loss. So you see that this investment might 1 million BDT might go down to 0.2 million, or this investment might go to 1.5 million. So you see, if I include this 1 million investment in Zakat, and later it turns out that my investment goes to 0.2 million, it might seem inappropriate to me. So some people, what they do, that they consider only the realized capital gain instead of considering the investment. They consider only capital gain realized. It might be the case that all of my assets are invested in a stock market, and if you just can remember that 600,000 Nisab amount, and you see that all of my money wealth is invested here, and I have to pay Zakat. In that case, I might need to sell some of my assets or some of my investment. So there may be the situation that if I go for selling it, any portion right now, I will be incurring loss. So that's why people tend to feel that I will only pay zakat if I realize capital gain from it. I'll not consider the invested asset. Now, from the taqwa perspective, it is not the right way that I will be paying zakat on capital gain, because zakat is based on the wealth, not based on the gain, or not based on the income you are generating from the asset. Rather, it is based on the wealth level, asset level. And another thing which creates confusion, that people do not, or people cannot be certain that whether I will be occupying this land or I will be renting this property out. So if I rent this property out, if I have an intention of renting this property out, zakat will be leviable, or otherwise zakat will not be leviable. Now the question is, what I shared earlier, that people tend to believe that if I do not have the cash, I will not be responsible. So some people might engage in purchasing asset, purchasing immovable asset with his cash to avoid zakat. But there is nothing such that only cash, if you have only cash, then you will have to pay zakat. If you have immovable property and you do not have the intention to personally occupy it, in that case, zakat will be leviable on it. So some building owners have a tendency to build one building after another building with the amount of cash what he or she has generated from the monthly rental income from the existing buildings. So at the end of the day, you'll see that he or she has no or very less amount of cash available other than the rental income. You see, the rental income is not, if income is not a part of wealth unless it is in the form of cash. When it is in the form of cash, or it is in the form of deposits, or it is in the form of other fixed asset, in that case it will be considered as, and you know that income is a concept which is a kind of flow concept. It is a kind of flow concept, but wealth is not a flow concept. Wealth is a concept which is applicable, is a kind of a stock concept. Is a kind of a stock concept. On a particular day, you consider wealth. You consider or you estimate the amount of wealth. So these are the some issues which arise in the calculation of zakat. And now we like to discuss regarding the administration of zakat. And it is a challenging task, and there are debates with the zakat administration, that whether it should be personally managed, or it should be managed, or it should be administered by government authority. So are you aware of the fact that Bangladesh government has a zakat fund? Have you heard about it? Bangladesh government has a zakat fund.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so there is a scope of administering zakat through government intervention in our country, and it is also the practice in other Muslim countries. And in Saudi Arabia, there is a separate department of zakat and income tax. And what we need to make sure that zakat is managed in a way which has a transparency of all the records of receipts and payment. And preferably it should be audited on a time interval, and governance should be ensured. And one thing which should be highlighted, that it is the money or it is the wealth for these people, poor and needy people. So it cannot be used for government expenditure. It cannot be used for government expenditure. And if it is managed by any financial institution, in that case, the responsibility of maintaining this Zakat fund is on the administrator or the charity fund or the charity institution, which is the sponsor of this Zakat fund. Though Zakat fund is managed by a financial institution, it should be administered by the charity, by the Zakat fund administrator or Zakat fund sponsor. And government cannot use the Zakat fund for any kind of expenditure for infrastructure development. It should be exclusively used for poor people. And there's a debate that can we replace the income tax liability by Zakat? Are these same? Are we paying double? We are paying Zakat, we are paying income tax. Are these two things same? And can one offset another, or can one be replaced by another? When you pay tax, income tax, you expect some recourse from government, not directly but indirectly. Recourse here I'm meaning the return. You expect some return, not directly but indirectly. But when you will be paying Zakat, what do you expect in return? Can we expect anything other than the reward from our Creator in the afterworld?
No, sir.
Okay. So there is a fundamental difference between the income tax liability and the obligatory Zakat payment. Another thing that you probably have learned, that Zakat is for purifying our wealth. Zakat is paid by the people for the purpose of purifying their wealth. And now, what is the definition of impurity of wealth? So there is no conventional definition that how wealth become impure. However, from the perspective of Islam, we know that when we generate income or when we generate wealth through any means which is Sharia incompliant, our wealth becomes impure. So we do not know in which way our wealth become impure. And we may claim that with my own knowledge, we have not earned any wealth from any means which is Sharia incompliant. But there was a prediction made made in the hadith that there will be a time when nothing will be pure. So either within our knowledge or without our knowledge, we are accumulating property, and there are some issues which on which or about which we are not aware of it, and if we would become aware of it, we would say that this is not a pure way of accumulating wealth. And another fundamental difference between income tax and zakat is that in income tax, it is the basis is income, and zakat, what is the basis? Basis is the asset, nisab amount of asset, or assets which is greater assets including the nisab amount of assets. This is the basis. So they are fundamentally different. Now, if the percentages are same, say for example 2.5%, for the same amount of income, for the same amount of revenue, or for the same amount of donation, on which base the percentage should be higher, income or assets? Is my question clear? Say for example, I want to secure the 50,000 taka donation or 50,000 taka tax revenue. The percentage of this 50,000 on income or assets, in which case it should be higher. In comparison to income, asset is much greater. If we consider our annual taxable income and the amount of assets we are holding for last 1 year, which is likely to be greater? Asset is likely to be greater. If asset is likely to be greater, for the same amount of 50,000, for the same amount of 50,000, the percentage on income should be higher. Nazibur, you have provided answer in the chat box. Yeah, that is the correct, that the percentage on income should be higher. So that's why you see that on an average, the income tax liability ranges from 10% to 15% in our country. But zakat, for last 1500 years, and for all the years up to the last day of the world, it will be 2.5%. It cannot be 2.51%. It cannot be 2.49%. So it is a kind of fixed tool. It is a fixed, this percentage. Now, you see, when we need more expenditure, government requires more expenditure. The income should be, more income should be generated. Is it possible to collect zakat on a basis of 5%? Can government be allowed?
No, sir.
Government cannot be allowed. But if government wants to take the VAT rate from 10% to 15%, can government be allowed?
Yes, sir, surely.
So you see that there is a difference between zakat and the tax system. So it cannot be fundamentally, it cannot be substitute of income tax liability. However, government in many countries provide reward for paying zakat. Say, for example, in Malaysia, if you pay zakat, you will get a receipt which will reduce your income tax liability. And in our country, Bangladesh, when you will be paying income tax liability, for paying zakat only to the government zakat fund, you will get tax exemption facility. You probably have the knowledge of investment tax credit, that for certain amount of investment expenditure, you will get a rebate on your income tax liability. And there is a list of items, and on those items, one item is the donation to the government zakat fund. So it can be, it is provided, and it is a practice in Muslim countries. So when there is a economic recession or economic or what should I say, that economic boom, how zakat will be moving. So when there is economic boom, say economy is here or economy is here, in which case it is expected that zakat will be greater. Here, the amount of asset held by people will be a greater amount. Is it expected that the wealth level, if I consider wealth here, wealth in terms of dollar, and if I consider time here, and when there is economic boom, the amount of wealth held by the people on which zakat will be applicable is expected to be greater, and the zakat will also be expected to be greater amount here.
Yes, sir.
Relative to this amount, relative to the amount which will be available here. Okay. Now the question is, in which case the necessity of zakat donation will be greater? In the recession time or the boom time?
Sir, recession time sir beshi thakbe sir.
Recession time. So when you will be receiving zakat in during this time, who are you? You are zakat administrator or zakat fund administrator, for example, or your financial institution who has a who is managing the zakat. Okay. Now the thing is that when you are here, it should not be like that you will disburse all the zakat amount in this time. Okay. So what can you do? You can keep a balance of zakat amount what you have received during this time, and you make it invested and spend it later when the time is not good. So that you will not fall into deficit here. Have we got the point? I believe that you have got the point.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir, please repeat the last line.
Last line means when you have a good time, do not go for spending all the zakat amount what you have received from the donors. You keep a balance and use it when there will be a time when enough zakat amount will not be collected, but the necessity of zakat disbursement will be greater. That's why you can use the balance accumulated from previous years, from the good years, to be used for the bad years. Clear?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Waqf. Okay. You probably have come to learn this concept separately, but let me write it down together for your convenience so that you understand. that these things are saying. Waqf, endowment, foundations, these things. What is the purpose of these things? What people do? People donate a portion of their wealth for the purpose of greater benefits of society. So it might be in the time when person is alive, or it might be in the time when person is not alive. But usually when people do waqf, people are in their life, and people do it before their death. And you know that on the asset, what people hold, asset can include cash, land, or building. There is a Sharia rule regarding the distribution of this wealth to the children or to the wife as a part of inheritance. There is a Sharia guidance what people need to follow. I mean, for the people, for the Muslims. Okay. Now the thing is that out of the wealth, 1/3 of the wealth, on the 1/3 of the wealth, people have discretion that I will not use this. It might be the case that I will not use this as a asset to be inherited to my wife or children. Rather, I will be donating this 1/3 of wealth. So it can be maximum 1/3. So it cannot be like that. What we see that some people are saying that I have donated 100% of my estate, and you means children or the people who will be inheriting, you will get nothing. So it is not the case. Rather, 1/3 of the asset can be distributed, and it can also be kind of a lifetime donation, or it can also be kind of people generate a monthly, or people contribute monthly, or people contribute annually to a fund, and that fund has been endowed, or that fund has been given as a charity, or that fund has been given as a waqf. Okay. Now the thing is that when I have created a waqf fund, I have some conditions. I need to follow some condition. So what are those conditions? The conditions are I have to create this waqf fund or endowment fund with the intention of gift or donation. So I will not expect any return on that. Usually for what purpose waqf is used? For the construction of mosque, or for the construction of madrasa, or for the construction of Islamic school. And waqf fund can be invested to generate income, which will be used for the people who will be the beneficiary of the fund. Now, in which thing waqf fund can be invested? You know it very well. It should be invested in Sharia compliant securities. Now, out of these probable assets which can be given as waqf, which asset you see most common as a waqf? Cash, land, or buildings? From your experience?
So land there is.
Land. Okay, so when the land will be given as waqf by a donor, there is usually a trust which will be managing this waqf asset. And this trust cannot sell the land in any way. However, what can they do? They can generate income by renting out this land or by leasing this land out. And at the same time, sometimes developers pay a handsome amount before taking the lease or when they take the lease. And the conditions what I was mentioning, that it is a kind of irrevocable. It cannot be taken back by the donor. And purposes can be specified earlier. And donor cannot take any reward, either financial or non-financial, whatever it is. And a trust authority is established to look after this waqf asset. And this trust looks after this property. And this trust can be established by the name of founder. You probably have heard about the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, right? You also probably have heard about Aga Khan Fund. Have you heard about this?
Yes, sir.
So these are the same nature, but when it is in the Islamic finance, in the Waqf, when it is Waqf, the rules provided in the Sharia should be followed. Now there is a debate on the issue regarding the administration of the Waqf. We have come to learn that trustee will be responsible for managing Waqf. So who will be appointing the trustee? The founder of the Waqf will be appointing the trustee, and he or she will mention the responsibilities of the trustee, and he or she will also mention that is there any right or his here's right on other property. He will be mentioning it. And this trustee, when it is in the Islamic finance environment, this trustee needs to follow the Sharia. That's why Sharia supervisory board is there to guide the trustee that this Waqf is managed following the Sharia guidance. So usually this Waqf is dedicated for the purpose of madrasa or Islamic school, these things. So there might be some issues that how the imam will be appointed in mosque, or to whom the imam will be responsible, to the board of trustee, or who will be providing the compensation, annual compensation to the imam. These things are some issues. And the trustee can form, or other than trustee, charity can also work as a trustee for the management of the Waqf property. So charities are usually regarded as more efficient relative to the government to manage the Waqf property. and to disburse the income of the Waqf property to the beneficiaries. So have you heard about that there is a Waqf board of Bangladesh government? We have a Waqf board. Have you heard about it? In our country, we have a Waqf board.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So there are some countries in Gulf which acquired all the Waqf properties by government order. So when government has acquired all the Waqf properties, what does it mean? Government will be managing these Waqf properties. But in our country, there are two ways of managing the Waqf properties. One way is that there is a private charity or private trustee who will be managing the Waqf property. And another way of managing the Waqf property is by the government. So you probably are much aware of our Bidyananda Foundation. So Bidyananda Foundation is a kind of privately, is a charity institution, privately managed, and it owns some Waqf properties provided by some donors. And government provides some benefits for the Waqf manage. I mean that to the institutions which will be managing the Waqf property. So one example is that, say for example, one trust is managing a managing Waqf property, and Waqf assets have been invested. And you know that if the amount is invested in, say, for example, securities market, there is a capital gain tax, and there is a tax on the dividend. So a trustee can claim that as I'm managing this Waqf property, give the exemption, give the tax exemption to the income or capital gain of this Waqf investment or Waqf asset investment. In that case, government might become very kind to provide this kind of tax advantages to the Waqf administrator, and it is very common. So tax advantages can be provided. And other things which we need to be concerned that when you will be using commercial use of the Waqf land, it should be used in a way which is Sharia compliant. Say some land have been given as Waqf to a mosque. So the mosque has, or the mosque authority or the trustee authority of the Waqf property has created a market. So a trustee has to make sure that market does not have any shop which sell Sharia incompliant products, or which do not provide any Sharia incompliant services. So these things are issues, these things are critical issues on which there will be some debate. So this Zakat and Waqf are the very good ways to ensure the equitable distribution of wealth in the society. But the thing is that if you compare the amount of revenue generated by Waqf, or the amount of disbursement by Waqf, and the amount of disbursement by Zakat, you would see that these are in a very growing trend over the years, particularly in Muslim countries, also in non-Muslim countries. But there is there is no reliable statistics in a global basis. But at the same time, the government expenditure has been growing over the years. So now if we try to claim that Zakat and Waqf will be providing enough support to the government for spending money for the poor, that may not be correct, because the amount of expenditure allocated for poor by the government might be greater than the amount available from Zakat and Waqf. So there is a huge amount of gap. There's a huge amount of gap. So in that case, there come the discussion on the issue that how this gap will be managed. This gap will be managed by borrowing, or this gap will be managed by generating tax revenue. So what are the ways government can do? So we'll be discussing on it after taking break of 10 minutes from now. It is now 8:40. We will be returning at 8:50 p.m. So we intend to know that as government expenditure has been growing rapidly over the years, relative to the growth of the charity contributions made in the form of Zakat and made in the form of Waqf. So how can government fill this gap? So what is the condition of government public finance or government finance in our country? So I believe that you have some idea that regarding the budget sides, regarding the government revenue, regarding the deficit in our budget. So let me ask you, what is the proposed budget, budgetary expenditure for this year budget 2021-2022 for Bangladesh? Can you recall that? What is the estimated budget expenditure? Just share the rough amount in terms of million.
স্যার এক্স্যাক্টলি বলতে পারছি না, বাট 6 লক্ষ কোটি টাকার উপরে।
Okay, you are absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. The amount.
এক্সাক্ট অ্যামাউন্টটা স্যার মনে নাই, 6 লক্ষ কোটি টাকার উপরে আর কি।
Okay, that is a very good idea. Okay. So, can you recall that how much of this out of what should I say? It is about 6 trillion. 6 trillion taka. If you ask about it, if it is 6 lakh crore taka, it is 6 trillion.
Yes sir, it can be.
Yeah. Up to 70 US. I need to check the US dollar amount. The taka amount is available with me. Okay, so we can take it by dividing by 85. Okay, so any idea that how much of this will be generated by government revenue, including tax and non-tax revenue in total?
Sir, approximately it would be 40 to 45% maximum.
40 to 45% maximum, including foreign grants.
No sir, it will be come from our revenue. Foreign grants is other concept.
Okay, so in that case you see a big budget gap, I mean big deficit.
Yes sir, every year we have been seeing that big amount of deficit occur in our budget.
Okay, so that has been happening. And it is a regular picture in developing countries, and we should not expect that we will have a surplus budget in any way during this time. We have a long way to go to to see such kind of picture that we have a surplus, and it is not a case in any way, or uh, it is a common case that budget deficit occurs. Now the thing is that, do you have any idea that how much of the, I mean, if it is around 45% from tax revenue, you can easily expect that the borrowing amount will be a significant percentage. Borrowing from foreign sources, borrowing from domestic sources will be a significant percentage amount. And today, one statistic has been shared in the National Parliament regarding the per capita debt level in our country. Have you seen that news? Per capita debt level?
Sir, according to last agenda,
Yeah.
the per capita debt would be more than 80,000 taka.
More than 80,000 taka. Okay.
Around
But-
2 years ago, it would be 68 to 70,000.
But I'm asking for the current level. I mean, as of today or as of this month,
Sir, as of this month, I don't know.
I probably have seen that this amount has been mentioned as 24,000 taka per capita. 24,000 taka per capita. But I see this number is much differing from the number mentioned by you. So I need to check, but
Sir, the
yeah.
amount of that will occur, or the amount of debt that have been created on every person's head throughout the country.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
The
not per
amount what I just have mentioned, 24,000, 24,000, it is about 25,000 taka. It is the foreign loan. It is not including domestic loan. It is only the foreign loan per capita. So probably the amount what you mentioned is including the domestic loan.
Yes, sir,
Okay,
it can be.
that's why that number is bigger, and
Yes,
the
sir.
number I have mentioned is smaller.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the thing is that we have recognized that there is a good amount of deficit in the budgetary revenue and expenditure. I mean, our total revenue. So what we do, we rely on the foreign loan, we rely on the domestic borrowing for the foreign borrowing or the domestic borrowing. So one statistic among the Muslim countries, Saudi Arabia is the countries which Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, these countries are in the list of the countries which has a highest amount of government revenue among the Muslim countries. And among the Muslim countries, Egypt is one of the largest debtor nation, where the government expenditure largely exceeds the government revenue. So you know it very well. There are mechanisms other than the managing this deficit through borrowing. How government generates more revenue, or how government generates its regular revenue. So government, when the regular revenue either through Zakat or Waqf is insufficient, you might not get a good picture of Zakat and Waqf fund from the case of Bangladesh, but the Muslim countries where Zakat constitutes a significant portion of revenue mobilized by government, in those countries, Zakat and Waqf have a significant contribution for government revenue. I mean, government will have to use this for the purpose of societal benefits. But what government can do other than these things, government can generate more tax revenue. So what are the scopes of generating more tax? Government can government can impose higher generalized sales tax. Government can increase the value-added tax or the scope of generating this revenue. And from Islamic perspective, there is no restriction on this kind of taxes, and government does a practice of progressive income tax. So what is progressive income tax? Progressive income tax is, in a sense, the person who has a higher amount of income will be paying higher taxes and at a higher rate, because he will be paying higher taxes because higher rate will be applicable. And the person who is in lower income level, that person will be in a lower income tax rate bracket. That's why that person will be paying lower taxes. So this is a way that how government tries to promote the social justice through the tax policy. Now, the question to you, Zakat is a progressive or not? Zakat is a progressive, regressive, or proportional kind of tax? Tax rate can be progressive, tax rate can be proportional, tax rate can be regressive. I already have shared the concept progressive. Regressive is just the opposite of progressive, and proportional is that regardless of the level of base, I mean the base can be income or base can be asset, the tax rate will be based on a certain percentage, say 2%. It can be, if you have a wealth of 2 crore, your tax will be 2% of the 2 crore. If your wealth is 2 lakhs, if your wealth is 2 lakhs or 20 lakhs, your tax will be 2% of 20 lakhs. It is the proportional. Now the question is, what kind of zakat, I mean, if the income tax is progressive, how, what kind of rate is applicable in case of zakat? Is it progressive, proportional, or regressive?
Proportional.
Sorry?
Proportional.
Proportional, exactly. Exactly. So proportional is not a practice in case of income tax because there is a tax slabs, and based on the income level, the tax rate changes. Okay, so actual tax rate is somewhat, I mean, our tax rate is somewhat mixture of progressive and proportional. So it is not purely progressive or purely proportional, but zakat is always proportional. So when we depend on income tax, we have to face some challenges. So what are the challenges? The challenges are like this, that people cannot be traced properly in the income tax net. And when people are self-employed, it is very difficult to assess that how much of the tax liability that person is incurring. Other than the income taxes, government also tries to rely on the wealth and inheritance tax, local property taxes for generating revenue for spending for social justice. You probably are aware of the government big program for ensuring social justice is social safety net. Have you heard about it? The government big program, one of the largest program taken by our government for ensuring social justice. Okay. So other than this, government can also generate more revenue by means of corporate taxes, and corporate taxes constitute a big proportion of government revenue in our country. In tax class, I mentioned these percentages, and if you want to see the percentages of these taxes in our country, what can you do? You can look for some lectures in the same channel where I share the Islamic finance and banking lectures. You will see a playlist on business taxation. You will see some percentages on regarding the contribution of these taxes in our country. So from the Islamic perspective, Zakat is the most prominent way to make sure the redistribution of wealth among the people. And there are some economic economic issues which create burden mostly to the poor class of society, kind of inflation, unemployment. So they need this charity level, these donations for getting assistance when they face their they face that their spending capacity or their disposable income level has declined, or they have lost their income due to unemployment. So these are some challenges. So another issue we like to highlight regarding the promoting social justice by government expenditure has becoming challenging over the years, because government is misallocating their expenditure and not prioritizing social justice, rather prioritizing some things in their budgetary allocation and fiscal policy. So one particular head that is attracting attention is the allocation in military, and mostly by following the practice of developed countries. Military expenditure in Muslim countries have grown tremendously over the years. Now the question is, for what purpose government is allocating a huge allocation for the military expenditure? Is it for developing the military capacity to protect the nations from the threat of foreign or threat from other countries in which the Islam is not a dominant, or other religions are dominant in such a case? But it has been found that Muslim countries are strengthening their military to protect their nation from other Muslim nations. So the sectarian split between among the Muslim sections or among the Muslim communities have encouraged government to prioritize the military expenditure and to give less priority to social services and other necessary services. So it has been found that in last years, in this last decade, early of the last decade, the Saudi Arabia and UAE spent a huge amount of expenditure for their military, not for becoming worried for the threat from Israel or threat from US. Rather, they are strengthening their military capacity to withstand the threat from Iran or threat from other countries where Shia are dominant, and they are not giving their concentration to ensure the peace process in the Palestine. So it is about how government should prioritize the social social services, and other than the taxes, other than the Zakat and Waqf, there are some other procedures or there are some other mechanism on which government concentrate to ensure social justice, which includes supporting people with in-kind transfer, supporting people with subsidies, and supporting poor people with by providing free education or free health services. Now we like to concentrate on three type of institutions which might work for assisting the poor people, for providing financing from the perspective of ensuring social benefit other than the motive of making profit maximization. So one institution can be Islamic Microfinance, and Islamic Microfinance, you know that the concept of microfinance is that they, as the people, marginalized people who have a very least amount of wealth, and they do not have the adequate property which can be collateralized by the conventional banks. That's why they cannot get their financing from the conventional banks. That's why the microfinance institutions are developed to assist these people by providing a small amount of credit, of which denomination can be even less than 10,000. And they do not take any significant collateral from these marginalized people. But the cost of administering these small advances from a mass number of people and from remote areas is high. That's why microfinance, conventional microfinance institution charges more than 20%, more than 30% in this range from the marginalized people. So it is a huge burden from the conventional perspective, but there is no other way, because they have to compensate this administration cost to the microfinance lenders. So obviously there are evidence that a number of people have been able to come out from the poverty level, and microfinance promoters are dreaming of getting zero poverty, zero hunger, and this evidence are showing that microfinance has become successful in providing credit to the marginalized people. However, there are evidence also in our society where the microfinance borrowers couldn't afford the repayment of the loan. That's why they have lost their land. They have lost their only dwelling house. So sometimes they commit suicide. These things are also evidence of these things are also not uncommon. Okay. So Islamic microfinance is with a view to provide credit to this group marginalized people. And I already have mentioned the characteristics of these people. And they will be usually Islamic microfinance is intended to provide Qard Hasan. So Qard Hasan is a kind of giving credit to this marginalized people without charging any interest. Without charging any interest. And there are some directions in the Quran to make help to these marginalized people and not to make any benefit out of the expense of these people. So that's why it is a kind of social responsibility to provide the Qard Hasan to the marginalized people who live near to our living, and to assist them with the Qard Hasan and to help them to come out from the poverty level. And another mechanism for providing credit to the people who require the financing is the credit union. And conventional, it is kind like conventional credit union, but one thing for which it is different from the conventional finance is that this credit union provide interest-free loan. So a group of people might join together and accumulate their cash balances, and they join a credit union through their deposits. And they mention some conditions that anyone among us, I mean the members, can take the loan from here, and he or she will be repaying this amount at this contractual period without any repayment, without any interest burden. So this thing can also, this thing is also available for the purpose of ensuring social benefit. And this kind of credit union can also get assistance from institutions like Islamic charities, like some Sharia compliant NGO. And the problem that which is faced by conventional finance and conventional credit union and conventional banks is the risk of adverse selection. So when you do not have the adequate information of the borrower, in that case, you are likely to select a person who is not a good candidate for taking loan from you. So that's why it is likely for that there will be an adverse selection. But in the Islamic credit union, as long as the persons who will be joining in a credit union they have the belief of or they follow the Islamic principles and they know each other. That's why the trust issue can be flexible. I mean, the trust issue is easier here, and the monitoring cost and also the cost of or the risk of making adverse selection is much lower in these cases. And concessional finance is a kind of financing to the people who will be needing finance at a rate which is less than the rate charged in the market for on an average. So you probably have come to learn how the Islamic banks provide financing to the people who need financing. So you probably can recall that a profit rate is added. A profit rate is added by Islamic lenders. So what Islamic lenders can do, if Islamic lenders thinks from the perspective of social benefit, they can provide a concessional finance to those marginalized group by charging a profit rate which is less than the market rate, and the gap, which is the difference between the rate charged by the Islamic banks and the rate which is the market rate for Islamic credit market. That difference can be subsidized from the fund of Islamic banks or financial institutions. So that is the way that concessional finance worked, and we like to end our discussion just by giving an idea of Islamic Development Bank, which is very much popular among the Muslim countries for providing assistance, particularly low-income countries under the OIC. And you probably have seen some initiatives which are financed by IDB for promoting education, for promoting health services, for promoting employment among the young unemployed society. So they provide financing to these countries and government of these countries, and also to the private institutions. And IDB started its journey in 1975, and also it works with the conventional global development organization and development agencies like World Bank, then Asian Development Bank, for assisting the OIC, for assisting the poor countries under the OIC. So on this note, we have summarized that, we like to summarize that there are mechanisms in the Islamic finance and banking for thinking about the people who are not privileged enough, but for ensuring the equitable distribution of wealth in the society, which is the call of this century, that we need to ensure the equitable distribution of wealth. Islamic finance and banking mechanism, which include the Zakat and Waqf, can provide a very good scope if they are properly implemented to achieve a society which is more equitable. So that is all about for today's class.